First impressions are important, and this show's first impression is that we're going to get kinky, and that's fine. It's just not my thing. Hello, welcome. Today we are discussing something new here. So I tried my first slice of life show. The show I watched is called Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. It's kind of a mouthful, right? As I said, this is my first slice of life experience. So that is my disclaimer here. This is all my opinion, and I understand a slice of life has certain themes and parameters that they stick to, whatever. Without further ado, my name is Rascal. Let's get into it. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai Episode 1. So let's start this one off with love. I'm going to list some of the things I enjoyed about the first episode before we get into some of the more negative things. The first thing I really enjoyed was the opening. I'm a huge fan of any show that puts a lot of details into their opening theme, where you almost get a condensed version of what the show is and what it's going to be about and some of the things that are going to be depicted. I think that was a nice touch to this show. The next thing I like about episode 1 is the vocal delivery.
How interesting.
I'm a big fan of the laid-back nature in which these characters speak. It makes them feel kind of like regular people as opposed to like puppets moving on a screen. Now, there are a couple of drawbacks to this style of acting, and I'll mention that a little bit later. But right now, I'll just express how the laid-back nature really adds to the overall vibe of the show. It gives the show this chill nature to it, which is really refreshing actually. Next thing I really enjoy is the music. I really enjoyed the song that comes on to introduce the end of the first episode. And while we're at it, I really enjoyed that last scene. It really put a bow on everything that happened and left you sort of wanting a bit more. Now, we're going to move on to some of the things I didn't like about this show.
Why do I hear boss music?
The first thing that stood out to me that I really didn't like about this show is the dialogue. So I mentioned the vocal delivery being really laid back, which is cool, but the dialogue, which is sort of separate, the word choice, the cadence, the tempo at which the characters speak, I am not a huge fan of in conjunction with that laid back dialogue. Both of these aspects coming together makes for a very boring watch. In particular, the train scene with Mai and Sakuta, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Second thing I don't like about this, by the end of the first episode, I don't love any of the characters. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world, but also it's not great either. The fact that by the end of this episode, I'm kind of just meh about everyone involved in this show doesn't really bode well for getting me to want to continue watching the show. The next thing I really didn't like was the opening scene. Well, maybe it wasn't the exact opening scene, but the scene in the library with her in the bunny outfit. I'll touch on that in a little bit. The last thing I didn't like about this episode was the overall theme of the show. This whole puberty syndrome thing is not the most compelling thing. Once again, we'll discuss that here in a little bit. So now that we mentioned all the things that I didn't necessarily like, I'm going to take a moment to describe how I would have improved these things. So let's discuss the dialogue. First off, I'd condense a lot of the conversations. Like this scene here. This scene comes off like I'm watching some awkward couple meander on about nothing in particular. We're just talking to talk with really no point for the conversation. I get that real life conversations can sometimes not flow well, but I do not watch shows to hear about you throwing your phone in the ocean. I don't care. Do something. And more on the dialogue, I would rewrite some of these lines. For example, here where they say,
Right, I think it's your turn to do the talking now.
no one speaks like that. There are so many overly worded sentences in this conversation alone. This makes the dialogue feel aimless and unnecessarily drawn out. I'd rewrite this line as, well, how about you, huh? This would have made the conversation flow so much smoother. We'll bundle these next 2 points, which is I don't love any of these characters in the opening scene, into one big correction right here. About the opening scene, I don't like that this show basically starts off with a girl in a bunny outfit. It's a little overly sexual. First impressions are important, and this show's first impression is that we're going to get kinky, and that's fine. It's just not my thing. To change this, I have 2 ideas. I would have put her in a spooky Michael Myers mask. This would have made for a neat reference and would have made the character instantly more charming. Option number 2. If Bunny Girl Senpai instead had a mini amp and electric guitar in the library playing horribly, that would not only have been smart for testing people who can see her, but it also would make for a great character introduction. Lastly, regarding the theme of the show. The theme of this show about puberty syndrome is fairly underwhelming. I'd be okay with this soggy, wet bread of a theme if there were anything else for me to connect to, like an interesting character or a character-defining moment, or Bunny Senpai showing off her acting chops in a street performance in an attempt to be remembered and seen. Anything like that would have really stood out and helped this theme really carry the show. So these are my basic overall thoughts of the show. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I wouldn't write home about it either. If you like this reaction, leave a like. If you hate this reaction, leave a dislike. Let me know what you think. How do you feel about Bunny Senpai? Is she mean? Is she awful? Is she the greatest character ever invented? Let me know. Check out this video, and I will catch you on the next one.